Since I have a new intro, I no longer have to do this, where I say the line myself. Regardless, welcome to a new video. The thing we're going to be talking about today is the top 10 books that I will be reading in 2026, or rather, hopefully will be reading in 2026, because if you don't know me, and if you do know me, I am a mood reader. I cannot force myself to read something because I did that for quite a bit in school. I was one of those people who read everything for school that was required reading, and I no longer want to do that. I just cannot be forced into it. As soon as I feel like I have to read something, I am suddenly in the mood to read anything but, or God forbid, I'm suddenly in the mood to read nothing. But these are like the 10 books that I personally would like to read this year. And I think it's kind of apt to do this at the end of January because my list changed a little bit, and you will see why. And because I've started several of these already. So these are realistically and feasibly books that I do actually want to read this year. Will I get to all 10? We never know, and I won't consider it like an achievement if I do, but these are like the 10 that I personally would like to read this year. The first book, and the one that I'm already a little bit embarrassed to talk about, is The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco. Okay. I am a little ashamed that I haven't read this already because I said I would read it during the winter. However, my plans were derailed by two books in particular. Like, I want to read this during the winter, and I will have to start it in like February or March, whether I finish it in winter or not, because I feel like it's one of those atmospheric books that I have to get through when it's the proper season. And we will get to why I didn't read this. I was supposed to start the year with this, and I did not. I'm not intimidated by it so much as I know that, like, he's a talker. Okay, Umberto Eco is a talker on the history and the context of the practices, and I'm sure he's going to want to tell me about all his research, which I won't really care about, but I have given myself permission to skim, just like through Victor Hugo. There's only so much I can take of info dumping that I do not care for, but it has to. It has to happen. That is the one that I am forcing myself to read because, like, it has to be read this year. The next book is the one that derailed my reading plans for January, and that is Once and Future King by T.H. White. Again, a chonker, because everything I want to read, apparently, are thick books. Okay, I have started reading this, like, immediately at the beginning of the year. I ordered it, like, near the end of December, and I started reading it as soon as it got here. I tried to read this once before from the library, and I did not like it because, again, my expectations were the wrong ones. I was really deep into, like, my Arthurian lore and mythology readings, which are more serious, whereas this is, like, taking the piss. This is essentially like a comical version of that. It is completely meant to not be taken seriously, which I did not know at the time, so I really, really didn't like it. And I sort of kind of read the ending that I vaguely remember and returned it to the library. But now that, like, some time has passed and I've seen people say that it's really funny and fun to read, I was like, okay, let's go. I'd like a less serious, like, Arthurian version, and this is still like one of the classics. The Disney film is based off of this, so I'm giving it a try. I read The Sword and the Stone. I have to start reading book 2 because another author actually, like, derailed my plans for this book that I'm reading it. Okay, it's an easy read, but there are certain things in the writing and in that T.H. White, like, chooses to highlight that I am not vibing with, that I'm hating, actually. So while I will finish this, if those elements don't go away, there is the potential that I will DNF this. Okay, there's the potential that I will DNF this, but for now, I am continuing on with book 2. So we will see where we go from there. But again, since this is one of the books that I have started already, it does belong in this video. I do want to finish it, unless unless the author himself forces me to put it down forever. Also, one of the books that I'm in the middle of, and will probably be in the middle of for like another 6 months, is Paradise Lost by Milton. Okay, I read how much of it? I'm on book 2. So like genuinely, I have not read much of this. Okay. This is a chore for me because again, as someone who can't read Shakespeare, like genuinely can't. Like I think I managed to read like 2 Shakespeares in my life. This is the kind of language that I feel like I have to trudge through, okay? I am listening to this alongside reading it. Like I found a production that I like to listen to, and that's the only way that I will ever get through this, but I will not go I will not lie to you. This is boring as hell. Apart from the performances, like I found the version that's been dramatized by like Satan is played by Palpatine, Ian McDermott, and I don't know who the narrator is. I don't know that actor, but basically famous people are like narrating it. That's the only reason I'm actually getting through this, okay? It's far too long for a poem, which I know is the point of epic poetry. I have never in my life gotten the appeal of epic poetry. Like at that point, write a novel. Okay, please write a novel. I'm just an epic poetry hater and always have been. I remember in high school there was poetry, there was literature, and then there were like epic poems, and I hated my time with every single one that we read. It always felt jarring because it was sort of like, for me, this is like a personal thing, obviously, so like it doesn't have to mean anything. You can really like epic poetry. Okay, people clearly did because they've been written for so long. Like novels, their length is sort of what gives them power. They get to explore and dive into stuff that poetry can't, whereas poetry sort of like hits you in the gut with its point and with its lyricism and its beauty in a shorter amount of time. Okay, I've never in my life enjoyed a poem longer than like a page, at best 2 pages, without feeling like, okay, like this is like nonstop, you know? Like poetry doesn't have an ending until the actual ending, so it feels like nonstop, like expectations of going on with like the rhymes and the verses and it just feels exhausting in a way that both novels and actual short poems don't. And I admire being able to make your point in a poem that's not several hundred pages long, you know? Like epic poetry to me feels like an insult to both of the halves of what it's doing. This is obviously just me. But again, as someone who was like studying, severely studying, like hardcore studying literature and poetry and grammar and languages for years, because I went to a hardcore like language and literature high school, I hated epic poetry, like even then, and I hate it now. The reason that I actually got Paradise Lost was because the themes of it sort of interested me, but when I saw it in excerpts online, okay, it's not the same thing as actually reading it. So if I do ever finish this, I won't really necessarily consider it a triumph. But also, anytime I look at it, I'm like, I don't want to read this. Like, I don't want to read this. Or even listen to it. Like, I'm not gonna lie to you. So, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens with this. But it is something I would like to finish, even if I have to listen to it like once a month. The next on the list is like any Star Wars. I will talk about these in a moment. But any and all Star Wars fiction novels, okay? I was really big into it, like before the pandemic, during the pandemic, and right after it. And then it sort of like mellowed out. And because 2 years ago in 2024, which is disgusting, a disgusting thing to say that 2024 was 2 years ago, I like went head first. I read a lot of Star Wars. I reread Revenge of the Sith, I think, for the first time in a long time. And then like immediately afterwards, I watched the Clone Wars and I watched the films. And it was a little bit traumatic for me to watch so many like things that impact me so strongly in one stretch of time. So 2025 is actually the first year in a very long time that I only read like one Star Wars novel. Not even one, actually, because I didn't finish it before the end of the year. So 0 Star Wars novels. The only year since I watched the Clone Wars for the first time that I didn't rewatch it. I did rewatch the films, and that was already a wrecking experience. And I read like the annotations in my copy of Revenge of the Sith that I got this year. But genuinely, like, apart from watching the films, which I do every year, I haven't interacted with Star Wars because I felt like I needed to recover from what I did to myself with that series in 2024. But again, 2024 was like a horrendous year for me. So I think everything that like I consumed during that time had a larger impact on me because I was already having like a disgusting year. So this year we want to get back into Star Wars. I am looking to get the DVDs of the Clone Wars so I can watch it without like the internet and indecent quality. Now that I have the DVD player that's actually well made. So I will rewatch the Clone Wars this year, but I also want to read Star Wars books this year and more of them. Now, I will finish Shatterpoint by Matthew Stover, and I'm planning like to finish it with tonight, essentially. But the thing we're going to read, like these two books are the ones that I pulled out because I actually don't have that many books that I haven't read in my Star Wars collection. This entire shelf is Star Wars if you haven't seen my bookshelf tour. Okay, so the options we have that aren't the Old Republic. Like I have 3 Old Republic novels. I'm not getting there yet. Okay, like I'm still reading like Skywalker Saga novels. I will get to the Old Republic novels because they do interest me. But probably once I start actually playing Knights of the Old Republic, the game, I'll be way more into that. Okay, so my options are of the books that I still haven't read after Shatterpoint, which better be the last depressing book because I need something that's going to make me feel not as absolutely dejected as that book does. Okay, so the last Clone Wars novel that I have, at least physically, that I do have some on my e-reader, is this, which is like the Cestus Deception, which has like Ki-Adi-Mundi, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Dooku, which is already everything that I want. Okay, this is actually quite a long Clone Wars novel. Like Dark Rendezvous and Shatterpoint are, they feel shorter than this. So this is one option. That's the last Clone Wars novel that I have that's unread. And the next one is like a book that someone gave to me, and I was like, why would I read that? Who cares about that? And that is Heir to the Empire, which is actually the first book of the Thrawn trilogy, which is apparently so well liked that now I do want to read it. Like I didn't know this was like an artifact that I had. Okay, like I think my dad's friend, who's also like a lifelong Star Wars fan, who named his children like Luke and Leia, he had like a random book to give to me, and then I think my dad got this in like a secondhand store for free. I basically got this for free, and I was like, why would I read this? Okay, like it looks horrendous. Like the cover is so stupid. I was like, it's about Luke and Leia's children. It's like I'm not really interested in post. Surprisingly, because I am a prequel kid, I'm not overly interested in post Return of the Jedi stories. So like this was the only one that I had, and I was like, I don't really care about it. But everyone is hyping up like the Thrawn trilogy so much that when I realized that that's actually what I have accidentally in my collection, I will actually read this. So like this is one option. Okay, this is one option. Again, mind you, I don't care about that era as much. I feel like people who grew up with the original trilogy and grew so attached to these characters feel about everything after Return of the Jedi the way that I feel about Clone Wars novels, you know? Like it feels like a time that's just so personal to me. I can't really put it into words, but point being, I don't really have that large of an attachment to like Luke, Leia, and Han, even though like, come on now. Like those 6 films have been like my favorite thing all my life. I don't have as much of an attachment to them as I do like Anakin, Obi-Wan, the Jedi Order, and all the characters from the Clone Wars era. So, point being, these are my 2 options, and I want to get to one of them. I also have like the 10 actual like children's novels where Anakin is the Padawan, because I'm super fascinated in the 10 years that Anakin was a Padawan for. And there's like children's novels. I do have that on my e-reader, I think, and I read one book from the era when Anakin is Padawan. Like I loved it. It was one of my favorite books that year. So those are also options, but these are like the physical books that I have. The only 2 physical books left that I haven't read that aren't Old Republic. I won't go on and on about the next book. This is like a bit of an embarrassment for me. Okay. Fixing the mic. Okay. The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. this poor novel I was meant to read this autumn, and I actually started it. There's like a tab. I actually started it back in November, but then I just went off the rails, and like I was just not in the mood for it. And like the farther into winter that we went, I was just not feeling it. I should have started this in October. I don't know why I did. I think I was a little busy in October. And then when university started, I was just in a whole other vibe. And I was like, it's not the time to read this. Okay, it's not the time to read this. I'm really not in the mood for it. But I did read a Wilkie Collins short story that I really loved. So I do know that I like his writing style and I want to read this book. But this year it will be it. Maybe I started in September. It's not autumn where I live in September. But I might start it in September and like kickstart it into like the Gothic months because I cannot read this during the summer or like spring or something. So I'm already depressed just thinking about the summer. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. Should have read this, but I put it down. I was just not in the mood for it, and I didn't really like want to force it. I don't think it's a book that I'd want to force. The next book that I do want to read, it doesn't matter what time of year, whenever I feel like it, is Hunchback of Notre Dame, okay? The old, the beautiful, like, vintage copy that I got off of Vinted from Poland, actually, because, like, I wanted this copy specifically. Looking at it, like, it seems so short. Okay, look at what the, like, it seems like it's 200 pages compared to 1,300. It's actually, like, 500, and the font is on the smaller side, but I want to read it. I want to read it. That's the second Victor Hugo book that I have that I will read, and I do want to read it. It's just that I already know that this will be stronger on the architecture front, which is why I like gave up reading this book already once before. It's going to be heavier on the architecture than Lemmy's was, and like I can't. If there's one thing that I cannot stand in any capacity, it's architecture, describing cities, anything like that, describing buildings. I'm like, I don't give a single solitary care in the world for that kind of description. So this will be interesting, but I do want to read it because I'm very interested in what Frollo is like in the novel, because obviously, like everyone like everyone else, I watched the Disney film already, so I do kind of know like the overall vibe of the book, but I'm really interested in specifically what Frollo is like in the novel, because I've heard that Disney actually made him way more evil than he was here. Book that I got recently that it depresses me to say this, but The Professor by Charlotte Bronte and the New Beautiful copies by Wordsworth's. Okay, it's a super short book. This is like Charlotte Bronte's posthumously published book that she didn't manage to sell the first time around when the three sisters sent out their manuscripts. Like her sisters sent out Agnes Grey, Wuthering Heights, and she sent The Professor, but obviously it didn't sell, so Jane Eyre was her first book. This was absolutely like wish fulfillment. Okay, she was writing about the guy she had a crush on in Belgium, and I understand this, and I didn't want to read this like for the longest time because I am against posthumous releases. Like as a writer myself, I think that what the writers themselves like sanctioned and approved of during their life is all that I should actually have access to. I don't like the releasing of like diaries or manuscripts without the permission of the authors. I don't like that, and I always think it's cash grabby by the family. That said, like all my personal opinions on posthumous releases, this was like €5 and it was such a pretty copy. And it's the last Charlotte Bronte that I have to read. I mean, obviously I have like Tales of Anglia, which she wrote with Branwell, but this is like actually like the last of her work that was actually like read and like written written and finished while she was alive, so it sort of isn't like a posthumous release, if that makes sense. I'm trying to justify it to myself, like, even though that is my belief, but this is the last Charlotte Bronte that is actually Charlotte Bronte, and I'm depressed about that, and I don't expect it to be any good, because no one thought it was any good while she was alive. She didn't think it was any good later on. No one who reads it thinks it's any good. Like, it's literally just her writing about her crush on the professor. Either way, I do want to read it because, like, I have to. sort of experience that aspect of her life. It's the last bit of the puzzle missing, and Charlotte, my soulmate from another century, I need to consume anything and everything available on her that I can. So I will try and make time for this like at some point during this year. This book that I also started, which is Lud in the Mist by Hope Mireles. Mireles. I'm going to say Hope Mireles. Lud in the Mist, basically. Okay. First of all, this copy is stunning. Like, it's stunning and it's floppy, deliciously floppy, which I'm a big fan of. Okay, so Lud in the Mist. I also was going to read this in November, the same as Woman in White, and I had to like give it up for the same reason that it was not the season to read this. The cover itself screams spring. And while yes, again, spring is elusive where I live, it's either really cold or really, really, really hot. I hope to read this in the spring. So ideally April would be when I read this book. It's short, it's not overly long. It is leaning a little bit into magical realism with like the fairy stuff, and I did read like I think a chapter or two of this, so I do know what the vibe is, which is not my cup of tea, okay, but it's one of the rarer like classics, sort of like Gormenghast, that's like pre-Tolkien fantasy, which is like hard to come by. Okay, recently we've been like the broader audience of the internet has been learning of like the older fantasies before Tolkien. So I do want to read it for that reason, even though I'm not that interested in fairy lore or any magical realism story. So this will be an interesting like step out of my comfort zone, but it's just so beautiful. Just looking at it, it feels like spring. So April probably it will be read. Book number 9 is a book that isn't out yet, but I do have to talk about it, and that is Unicorn Hunters by Catherine Arden. Okay, Catherine Arden is somewhere around here, basically. Winter Night Trilogy was one of my favorite stories, like for the longest time. Baron the Nightingale, like, still is. But her other book, the new one, Warm Hands of Ghosts, I had zero interest in. I even tried reading it. I did not care for it. Like, for the writing, for the characters, for the topic of it. Like, Winter Night feels like fantasy and magic, whereas the other, where I'm tripping over my tongue. Okay. Winter Night felt like a fantasy that happens to be historical, whereas Warm Hands of Ghosts felt like a historical novel that just happened to have fantasy, which is not what I prefer. So Unicorn Hunters, it sounds a little bit more up my alley, and I do want to see how she's developed as a writer, because at this point it's been like, which is again a horrifying thing to say, it's been like 7 years since the Winter Night trilogy ended, and I am not a teenager anymore, and she's probably, hopefully, changed and developed as a writer. So I hope it's not like Leigh Bardugo, where after her first trilogy I just do not care for anything that she has written. Okay, so let's hope that Unicorn Hunters is closer to Winter Night than it is Warm Hands of Ghosts. At least I hope. I hope that it is. I will be giving it a try. It's like the thing that I'm most interested to read this year of the many things that are coming out. The last one is the broadest, and that is anything by Patricia A. McKillip. Okay, I'm going to be holding up this book that I am currently reading. I read about 50 pages of it, and that is Signet, which is like a duology by Patricia A. McKillip. I will just be holding this up, okay, in place of the other books. I read the Riddlemaster trilogy in January, which we will be talking about in the wrap-up. I was just so in love with it, and it was such a new favorite of mine, same as like Witch Hat last year. Like, apparently the beginnings of the year are when new favorites present themselves to me for some reason. Okay, so as soon as I discovered her, I was like, okay, that's great, let's make it through her bibliography, because she's known for fantasy standalones. So it's like, okay, I read her trilogy, this is a duology, and then we will be working through the standalones. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert, I'm not liking this. I read 50 pages, I'm not liking it, like, at all, in the slightest. Okay, I really don't feel like reading it, whereas with the Riddlemaster trilogy, I could not stop reading it physically. Like, I read the second half of book 2 and the entirety of book 3, I think, in one day, in the span of like 9 hours. I genuinely just cleared all my all my responsibilities and tasks for university so I can like read it until the end in one stretch. Okay. I'm not liking this like at all. So the plan is I will keep reading and maybe change my mind on this. But even if not, I liked Riddlemaster so much that I want to read everything she has ever written. Okay, so I've sort of said like once a month I'm going to read one of her books, but they're very expensive and very difficult to come by. So if I don't like this, and this already cost me like 20 euros, if I don't like this, I will read some of the standalones on ebook and only purchase them if I liked them. That's my plan from now on. Okay, I bought this like immediately because of how much I actually loved Riddlemaster, but this was currently it's not the type of book where you're like 20 euros, like that was a steal or something like this. It's one of those, oh my god, I spent 20 euros on this. God, it's so not worth the money. But we will see. I hope I will change my mind. I really hope I will change my mind, okay? But regardless, this year I want to read as many of her books as I feasibly can. Like, there will probably be months when I read like more than one, especially when we get to the standalones, and maybe months when I don't read any because I've sort of soured on her stories. Either way, Patricia A. McKillip, she has like come into my life this year, and for now, at least, that is the plan, to read like at least one of her books per month. We will see whether it will be physically or digitally, but either way, I will have to read this duology again in February, which I'm not looking forward to at the state that we are in right now. So that's the plan for Patricia A. McKillip, and that is the 10th entry on this list. That is it. That is it from like my 10 books that I hope to read in 2026. This is obviously a very individual list. And I'm not doing the 2026 and 2026, like the people like upping the number of books that they are setting themselves up to read every year. I'm not doing that. Like that is too high a number. Okay, I'm so sorry. It was difficult finding these 10 books because for everything else that I had on my list, I was like, I might not be in the mood for this year. Okay, so it was super difficult finding 10 books that I actually want to sort of claim that I will definitely be in the mood for this year. So this was already very difficult for me to do, but I did kind of want to do it because I don't do TBRs anymore. I haven't done TBRs since like 2020 when I tried to do like 2 TBRs and then realized that those videos are pointless for me to make. So the next video that I will do will be a wrap up. It will be a wrap up for January and like sort of a mini wrap up for October, November, December, because I realized after my end of year videos that I never did like that wrap up, and there are several books that don't make it to my favorites or like least favorites lists that I do still want to talk about. So I will be making a wrap up next, and that will probably come out in early February. So in February, I am like clearing my days to watch the Winter Olympics because figure skating is something that has returned to my life. I've been sort of like following it my entire life, but I really got back into it like last autumn. So I'm really looking forward to the Olympics. Anyway, I am yapping. What are some books that you hope to read this year that you actually maybe like commanded yourself to read this year? You could be very motivated by like lists and forced reading lists. So what are some books that you want to read this year? And if they are any of the ones that I listed, please don't tell me that they're horrendous because I am going to read them. You can tell me after I've read them. I will see you in the next video.